The courtroom was packed that morning, but no one expected the doors to burst open the way they did. People turned their heads, annoyed at first, thinking it was just another late visitor. But then they saw her. A small black girl, maybe 7 or 8, standing in the doorway with messy hair, dirt on her clothes, and a determined look in her eyes that did not match her size. Her name was Maya. And even before she took her first step forward, people could sense something different about her. She was breathing fast, as if she had run all the way from another world just to be here. At the front of the courtroom, her father, Daniel, sat in an orange prison uniform. His hands were locked together, resting on his knees. He looked tired, defeated, as if life had been fighting him for too long. When he saw Maya, his eyes widened with shock and fear. "Maya, what are you doing here?" he whispered, but she could not hear him over the noise. Judge Harrison, the man in the wheelchair, looked up from his papers. He was known as a strict judge, someone who followed rules like they were the only truth left in the world. His wheelchair was positioned behind the bench, his hands resting quietly on the armrests, motionless. Years ago, an accident had taken his ability to walk, and with it, a lot of his hope. People whispered as Maya walked straight toward him. A few chuckled softly. A child in a courtroom was unusual, but a child looking this serious was even stranger. But Maya did not look left or right. She did not care that hundreds of eyes were watching her. She only cared about one thing, her father sitting behind her, wearing chains he did not deserve. When she finally reached the front, she stopped right in front of the judge's desk. Her small hands were shaking, but she lifted her chin with all the courage she had. The judge leaned forward slightly. "Young lady, where are your parents?" Everyone expected her to say she was lost. Or scared. Or confused. But her answer froze the entire room. "My dad is right there," she said, pointing at Daniel. "And you need to free him." A wave of laughter spread through the courtroom. Even some people who tried to hold it in could not help smiling. A child telling a judge what to do, it sounded like a joke. But Maya did not laugh. She took a breath and stepped closer. "If you free my dad," she said softly but clearly, "I will heal you." This time the laughter was louder. People covered their mouths, others shook their heads. They thought she was saying something childish, something she did not understand. But Judge Harrison did not laugh. Not even a smile. Instead, he looked at Maya with eyes that slowly softened. It had been a long time since anyone had spoken to him with such certainty. Especially a child. "Maya," Daniel whispered again, his voice breaking. He lowered his head, embarrassed that his little girl was becoming a spectacle. But she kept her eyes on the judge. She walked even closer, so close that the judge could see the dirt on her cheeks, the dried tear marks, the small cuts on her hands. The courtroom grew quiet, one breath at a time. The judge finally spoke. "And how exactly will you heal me?" Maya did not blink. She simply lifted her tiny hand and gently placed it on the judge's fingers. "Like this," she said. "Mama taught me. I can help you feel again." The room held its breath. No one laughed now. The moment her hand touched his, something shifted. Not a miracle, not yet, but something emotional, something human. The judge stared at their hands, then at Maya. His fingers had been still for years, but now he could feel warmth, warmth that he had forgotten his hands could hold. People leaned forward. Even the lawyers were staring now, confused but curious. Daniel felt tears gather in his eyes. Not because he believed Maya could heal the judge, but because she was still fighting for him when he had already stopped fighting for himself. Maya spoke again, her voice trembling but strong. "You think my dad is a bad man, but he is not. He works hard. He takes care of me. And he did not do the thing they say he did. I know it." She looked around the courtroom, her small body shaking as she forced her courage to stay alive. And if you give him back to me, she said, looking at the judge again, I promise I will help you walk again. The judge swallowed hard. He was supposed to be the strongest person in the room, but for the first time in a long time, he felt something he had forgotten: hope. The courtroom, once filled with noise, felt completely quiet. The moment was strange, unexpected, almost unreal. But it was real. And it was only the beginning. Judge Harrison sat frozen, his hand still resting in Maya's tiny fingers. The courtroom waited for him to say something, but the words would not form. He had listened to powerful lawyers, famous doctors, and top officials for years, yet nothing had ever shaken him the way this small girl's confidence did. He slowly pulled back his hand, not harshly, but gently, as if he needed a moment to understand what had just happened. Child, tell me your name, he finally said. Maya, she replied, her voice soft. My name is Maya Daniels. And what do you mean when you say you can heal me? The judge asked. Maya took a breath. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't blink. My mama used to help people who were hurt. She called it pressure healing. She taught me everything before she went to the sky. The room grew quiet again. Even people who had been smiling earlier lowered their eyes out of respect. Maya continued, speaking slowly, choosing her words carefully like her mother once taught her. Mama said hands can talk. If someone cannot move their legs, sometimes the hands still remember things. She used to help old people in our neighborhood. Some could not walk well, but after Mama's healing, some got better. Some could even stand again for a little time. The judge listened closely. Not because he believed her, not fully, but because something in her voice felt real. Honest. Human. And you think you can do this for me? He asked. Maya nodded. I already felt something in your hand. It moved a little. You felt it too. A whisper moved through the courtroom like a wave. Some people leaned forward. Others exchanged confused looks. A few doctors in the back, who had been attending another hearing, watched Maya with interest. Judge Harrison exhaled slowly. Maya, even if that were true, this is a courtroom. Your father's case is. He is innocent, Maya said before he could finish. I know he is. Her voice cracked for the first time, and Daniel's chest tightened. He hated that she had to do this. He hated that a child had to fight for something adults should have seen themselves. The judge looked at Daniel. Mr. Daniels, did you know your daughter would come here today? Daniel shook his head. No, Your Honor. I swear. I had no idea. She must have run all the way from home. Maya wiped her cheek, leaving a faint streak of dirt. I came because you were going to take him away forever. I heard people talking. They think he did something bad, but he didn't. He was working that night. I know that because I was waiting for him to come home. He never missed a night, not once. Daniel lowered his head. Tears fell onto his orange uniform. Maya was telling the truth, he never missed a night because she was all he had left. Judge Harrison studied the little girl again. Something inside him tightened, the same feeling he used to have when his own daughter would ask him a question he could not answer. He glanced down at his hands, the hands that had not held weight, strength, or feeling for years. He remembered the accident, the sound of metal, the flash of light, the scream he could never forget. After that day, life felt like a long hallway with no doors. But now this little girl stood before him holding a key. Why do you believe you can help me? The judge asked softly. Maya stepped closer. Because Mama said healing works when both hearts are open. Yours is open today. I saw it when you looked at my dad. He swallowed. She was right. Something inside him had cracked open the moment she grabbed his hand. Not physically, but emotionally. Spiritually. He looked around at the courtroom. Everyone was watching. Waiting. Child, He said carefully, you understand that healing someone takes more than a moment. It takes time, care, and skill. I know, she replied. That is why I'll come every day. I'll help you until you walk again. Even if it takes years. A woman in the front row put her hand over her mouth. A man behind her whispered, this kid, she's something else. Judge Harrison pressed his lips together, thinking deeply. He was not a man who made emotional decisions. Everything he did was backed by logic, evidence, and law. He had lived his whole career with that mindset. But today felt different. Today felt personal. Maya, he said gently, why is it so important for you to heal me? She looked right into his eyes and answered with a truth so raw and pure that it silenced the entire room. Because if I heal you, maybe you will believe my dad deserves a second chance too. The judge felt a lump form in his throat. He was not used to feeling much these days, not since the accident. Yet here he was, fighting emotions he thought he had buried years ago. The bailiff shifted, unsure of what to do. Lawyers sat motionless. Even the stenographer paused her typing. After a long moment, Judge Harrison spoke again. For the first time in the entire case, he was willing to listen with an open heart. He turned toward the room. Court will take a brief recess. A murmur rose through the audience. The judge added quietly, I need time to understand what has just happened. As he wheeled himself away, something extraordinary happened. His left foot moved. Just a small shift. Barely noticeable. But Maya saw it. And she smiled with quiet certainty. This was only the beginning. The recess room behind the courtroom was quiet, almost too quiet. Judge Harrison sat near the window, his wheelchair positioned slightly sideways as if he needed to face the world differently now. His hands rested on his lap, but he kept glancing at them every few seconds, still shocked at what just happened. Maya stood near the wall, waiting patiently. She looked small against the tall wooden panels, but her presence filled the space with a strange warmth. She was not smiling proudly or acting surprised. Instead, she seemed calm, almost as if she expected the miracle all along. Daniel, escorted by the guard, was allowed to stand a few feet from her. His eyes never left his daughter. Maya, he whispered, voice full of pain and pride, you should not be here. This is too much for you. She shook her head. Daddy, I came because no one else listens when you speak. So I spoke for you. The simple sentence hit Daniel harder than any punishment. He closed his eyes for a moment, swallowing the guilt he carried for months. Judge Harrison turned his wheelchair slightly toward them. Mr. Daniels, he said softly, your daughter has made quite an impression. Daniel looked down at his wrists, the handcuffs still tight around his skin. Your Honor. Maya does not understand how the world works. She thinks. She understands more than most adults, the judge interrupted gently. Maya stepped closer to the judge. Can I tell you something? She asked. He nodded. When Mama was alive, she used to help people who were sad, Maya said. Not just their bodies, but their hearts too. She said when someone becomes hurt inside, their body becomes tired. She used to say you heal the inside first, then the outside follows. Judge Harrison's breath caught. No one knew about the pain he carried, the heaviness that followed him since the accident. His mind drifted back to that night, the crash, the fire, the silence that followed. He had survived, but part of him never truly healed. Maya continued quietly, I saw your eyes when I walked in. They looked like Daddy's eyes. Sad, tired, hurt. I know that look. The judge's voice softened. Your mother taught you a lot. Maya nodded slowly. She said pain makes adults forget they are still human. That is why kids like me have to remind them. The judge smiled faintly, the first real smile he had allowed himself in years. It felt strange on his face, almost unfamiliar. He took a breath and looked at Daniel. Your daughter says you're innocent. Tell me, Mr. Daniels, what happened the night of the incident? Daniel looked at the guard, then the floor. Your Honor. I have told the truth 100 times. No one believed me. I am asking you again, the judge said gently. Not as a judge right now, but as a man. Daniel looked up, surprised by the softness in Harrison's voice. I was at work, Daniel began. I was doing overtime because Maya needed school supplies. I left late, walked home, and the police grabbed me 2 streets away. They said I matched the description. I tried telling them I had proof, my time card, my shift logs, but they did not take anything seriously. Why? The judge asked quietly. Daniel exhaled slowly. Because I grew up in the neighborhood they ignore. Because my skin is the same skin they fear. Because they thought it was easier to choose me instead of finding the real person. Maya moved closer to her father, placing her hand on his arm gently. Judge Harrison felt something heavy in his chest, a mixture of anger and regret. He had heard too many cases like this, but he had never looked directly into the eyes of the child affected by it. Maya, the judge said softly, your father's case, it is complicated. She shook her head. No. It is simple. He is my dad. He is kind. He works hard. And he would never hurt anyone. She stepped forward again and lightly touched the judge's arm. You felt your hand move, right? He nodded slowly. Yes. That means miracles can happen, Maya said. And sometimes adults need miracles to see the truth. The room was quiet again. The judge stared down at his hands, still remembering the small, stunning movement he felt earlier. It was not enough to make him walk again, not yet, but it was enough to make him question everything else around him. Maya, he said softly, why did you wait until today to come to court? She looked down at her shoes before answering. Because I was scared. I kept thinking adults would laugh at me, just like before. Before, the judge repeated gently. She nodded. When Mama was sick, I tried telling people I could help her. They laughed at me too. They said kids cannot help big problems. But Mama, she believed me. The judge's heart twisted. And I believed her too, Maya continued. That is why I came today. Because if I can help you even a little, maybe you will help us too. Judge Harrison lowered his eyes, feeling something break open inside him. For the first time in many years, he felt human again, someone who could be wrong, someone who could hope, someone who could feel. He looked at Daniel and then at Maya. I am going to reopen your father's evidence files, the judge said quietly. And Maya, I would like you to continue helping me. If you are willing. Maya nodded eagerly. I will help every day. For the first time since his accident. The judge believed healing might truly begin. The courtroom returned to session, but the atmosphere felt completely different now. Before the break, people had laughed at Maya. They had seen her as just a child with wild hope. But after what happened in the recess room, every person in that courtroom sat straighter, quieter, more alert. Rumors had already spread through the hallways. The judge moved his hand. The little girl did something. Something impossible happened. By the time Judge Harrison wheeled himself back to the bench, the room was full. Even people from other cases slipped inside just to witness what might happen next. The judge took a moment before speaking. His hands rested on the bench, and they were not as still as before. Even small movements now looked like silent proof of something extraordinary. Maya, he said gently, please come forward. She walked to the front with the same bravery she had shown earlier, but this time the room did not laugh. They watched her as if she were carrying something sacred. The defense attorney whispered, good luck, kid, when she passed him. The prosecutor straightened his papers nervously. He had never imagined a child would change the direction of his case. Judge Harrison turned to the room. Before we continue, I want the record to reflect that the court has witnessed, privately, a physical response in my hand after therapeutic contact initiated by this child. Gasps filled the room. The stenographer typed each word carefully, her hands shaking slightly. The judge continued, though I cannot allow this to influence my judgment unlawfully, I cannot deny the reality of what I felt. Maya looked up at him, eyes gentle, hopeful. Now, the judge said softly, you may continue what you were doing. The courtroom around her grew silent, almost reverent. Maya stepped up to the bench and placed her small hands gently on the judge's fingers again. People leaned forward, trying not to blink. She pressed the same point as before. A subtle tremor moved through the judge's hand. Then another. Clearer this time. The audience gasped again. But Maya wasn't finished. She moved to his wrist and pressed another point gently. The judge's hand lifted, just a few millimeters, but lifted. The room erupted in whispers. A doctor in the back stood up. Your Honor, with respect, that is voluntary movement. That means there is live nerve response. Is it normal? Someone whispered loudly. No, the doctor answered. Not after years of paralysis. The judge looked overwhelmed. He rubbed his thumb slowly against his palm, watching the movement with tears rising in his eyes. Your Honor, the prosecutor said shakily, this should not be happening. Perhaps not, the judge replied, voice trembling. But it is. The courtroom fell silent again. Then something unexpected happened. A young man in the back row, quiet until now, stood up suddenly. Your Honor, he said, voice breaking, I cannot stay quiet anymore. I saw the whole thing. I was there the night they arrested him. All eyes turned to him. Even the guard shifted, ready to move if needed. The judge gestured for him to come forward. Who are you? My name is Travis, the young man said, hands shaking. And I was walking home that night. I saw the man who actually did it. He ran into the alley before the police came. But when the officers grabbed Daniel, I got scared. I didn't say anything. I didn't want trouble. The prosecutor stared at him, stunned. You're saying you withheld information? The young man nodded, guilt heavy in his eyes. I was wrong. But after seeing this little girl heal you, I can't keep the truth to myself anymore. That man, he wasn't Daniel. He was taller, bigger. He had a tattoo on his neck. Daniel wasn't the one. Daniel's breath caught in his chest. Maya squeezed his hand tightly. The judge leaned forward. Do you swear everything you are saying is the truth? I do, Travis whispered. The prosecutor swallowed. Your Honor, this drastically changes the case. The judge nodded slowly. It does. Maya looked up at the judge, her eyes filled with a quiet, powerful certainty. See? When you feel hope, truth comes out. Judge Harrison looked back at her, overwhelmed. He could no longer deny the connection between physical healing and emotional truth. He examined Travis carefully. Your testimony will be added to the record. And an investigation will reopen immediately. Maya took a small step back, watching the judge's hand continue to twitch, clearly now, not by accident. The judge rested his hand on the bench, breathing deeply. Ladies and gentlemen, this is no longer an ordinary case. Justice requires we examine every piece of evidence again. And until then. He paused, looking at Daniel. I am suspending the immediate judgment against Mr. Daniels. Tears filled Daniel's eyes. Maya nearly dropped to her knees from relief but stood strong. People in the courtroom began whispering, some even clapping softly until the bailiff calmed them. The judge looked at Maya once more and said something no one expected. You have reminded this court what humanity looks like. The courtroom felt different that afternoon, lighter, warmer, almost as if the walls themselves were breathing out relief. People whispered, cameras clicked softly, and everyone waited for the final decision with eyes filled with hope and disbelief. Judge Harrison returned to the bench, but something about him had changed. His posture looked stronger. His hands rested more confidently. Even the wheels on his chair seemed quieter, as if they too sensed the moment. Maya stood in front with her hands folded together, looking small but shining with courage. Daniel watched her with a trembling smile that carried every emotion a father could hold. When the judge began speaking, his voice was calm but carried weight that silenced every corner of the room. Today, I have witnessed something I cannot explain with law or science alone, he said. But truth does not always show itself through logic. Sometimes, truth reveals itself through courage. He looked directly at Maya. And sometimes, truth reveals itself through a child. The room murmured softly. The judge turned to the audience. The testimony we heard from the young man earlier confirms major inconsistencies in the original case. Combined with evidence that was overlooked, this court has a duty to act. He paused. Everyone leaned forward. It is the judgment of this court, that Daniel Daniels is hereby released effective immediately. Gasps. Cries. Hands covering mouths. Daniel froze, unable to breathe for a moment. He stared at the judge, then at Maya, then at the officers who were already unlocking his handcuffs. The metal clicked open, falling softly to the floor. He rubbed his wrists gently, as if testing whether the freedom was real. Maya ran to him. He caught her in his arms, lifting her in a tight embrace. They held on to each other like two people who had survived a storm no one else understood. People around them clapped, some wiping tears. Even lawyers who had seen thousands of cases felt something powerful rise in their chests. But the moment was not over. The judge took a deep breath and tried to straighten his back. Slowly, he placed his hands on the armrests. Everyone watched him. Slowly, painfully, he pushed. His left leg shifted. Then the right. A ripple of shock swept across the room. Maya watched closely, her eyes filling with awe and certainty. She stepped near him but did not touch, waiting for him to choose the moment. The judge placed more weight on his hands. Then he stood. Not fully. Not tall. Not confidently. But he stood. On his own legs. People gasped loudly. A woman in the back began crying. A man next to her whispered, "It's a miracle, it's really a miracle." The judge held the edge of the bench to stabilize himself. His voice shook, but his words were strong. This child believed before any of us did. He looked at Maya with soft, grateful eyes. You healed more than my body today. You healed a part of me I thought was gone forever. Maya stepped forward and slowly wrapped her arms around him, resting her cheek lightly against his robe. The judge closed his eyes, fighting tears. For years he had lived with guilt, pain, and silence. Today, a little girl broke all three. When the courtroom finally calmed, the judge looked at Daniel and said, "Your daughter is a blessing. And you deserve a life where you are free to raise her." Daniel nodded, barely able to speak. Thank you, Your Honor. I will never forget this." The judge steadied himself again. This court will reopen the investigation to find the real culprit. And Maya, if you are willing, I would like you to visit me every week. Not just for healing, but because this world needs more people with your heart. Maya smiled shyly. I'll come. I promise. The bailiff opened the doors to let everyone out. But something unforgettable happened then. As the judge prepared to sit back down, he lifted one foot and took a small step. Then another. He walked. Only a few steps. Slow. Shaking. But walking. The courtroom exploded into applause. People stood. Reporters cried. Even the bailiff wiped his eyes quickly, pretending he wasn't emotional. Judge Harrison let out a shaky breath, overwhelmed by the cheers echoing through the hall. Daniel carried Maya in his arms as they walked toward the exit. She pressed her head against his shoulder, her small arms wrapped tightly around him. Outside the courthouse, sunlight fell over them like a blessing. Cameras flashed. People cheered for the little girl who had changed everything. The judge rolled out behind them, using the chair only because he tired quickly. But his face glowed with a hope he thought he would never feel again. Before Daniel walked out the final door, the judge called after him. "You came in here in chains, but you're leaving with honor." Daniel stopped, tears sliding down his face. "And you, Your Honor, walked again because you believed in my daughter." They exchanged one look, a look of respect, gratitude, and healing. Daniel walked out with Maya in his arms. The judge walked a few steps behind, steady but proud. And the world, both inside and outside that courthouse, would never forget the day a little girl's love proved stronger than fear, stronger than doubt, and strong enough to make a broken man stand again.